Welcome everybody, this is Tim Watrous, President of Digital Advisors.
And this is Kevin Gordon, President of Capital Advisors Group.
We'd like to welcome you to our K-12 Politics and Tech video series.
Our objective is to give you the absolute latest of what's going on in Sacramento that affects public school districts, obviously, and as well as all the technology stuff that's going on that's so vital to delivering for kids these days.
And remember, if you find these videos useful, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and share out over social media. You're our marketing team. We appreciate your support, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, welcome everybody. My name is Tim Watrous. I'm President of Digital Advisors, and we're back with another episode of K-12 Politics and Tech. As always, co-host of the show, Kevin Gordon, President of Capital Advisors is here. Kevin, glad you're here.
Yep, it's a big day, probably one of our bigger news days for the broadcast.
Absolutely, yeah. And by the way, I just want to welcome folks that may not have seen this show before. The governor's revision probably drawing a lot of folks in, and we want to say thanks for being here. Also want to just say we do this to try to be helpful. We have no marketing budget. You're our marketing team. So if you like this, please give us a like, help share us in social media, and just go ahead and share this with any colleagues or friends you think might find it useful. So thanks for being here. By the way, we're over almost at 700 subscribers. We want to get to 1,000. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll get rolling with the show. So Kevin, everybody's really anxious to hear. The governor made his announcement about the May revision. Can you please just tell us some of the highlights from the announcement today?
Yeah, and you know, you're one of the big promoters of our budget workshop series. So we have that. That's going to be rolling out not this coming week, but the week after we get going. I think it's on the 22nd, 23rd rather. And then we're going to be in 40 something locations all across the state. So, and then a few of those are actually going to be virtual, and we'll have a link on that later. But I wanted to kind of give you guys kind of the top line, what's going on with this. And I know, Tim, you had some questions about how this all works out. But the really good news, I was actually expecting the governor to sandbag a little bit. And the reason why is kind of what's going on with regard to the stock market. And, you know, I have this little joke that I always say that when, you know, Wall Street catches a cold, California's budget catches pneumonia, is that we always have to be really mindful of that. And so I had communicated with a few of you guys, those of you that are clients of mine, about the fact who had asked me questions this morning about what I expected. And I said, well, I'm expecting a final budget that's going to be one of the best budgets we've ever seen, but it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be in the May revision. And then we got the May revision today at 10 a.m. and we looked at it, and it's a remarkably good May revision despite all of that. Now, we haven't done all the math on it yet to see what that proportionality of ongoing versus one-time money is. But I have a funny feeling that when the dust settles, we're going to see a bigger proportion of one-time money in this revision than perhaps we saw in the January budget, so that the governor can make those adjustments if revenue doesn't show up, you know, in out years, which I think they're anticipating. But I mean, the biggest news in the budget, there's a couple of areas that were not in the January budget that are in this May revision that are incredibly significant for us in K-12 education. The number one issue being, and we've talked about it all across the state, is raise the base funding. And I know for our community funded districts, we're still waiting to see some of the attributes that could happen in a budget. There's not much in here for you that's ongoing, but there are some pots of money that are getting bigger that are going to help you. But for all the rest of the districts across the state that are really champing the bit for that base funding investment, the governor does make the move, which was totally anticipated, of adjusting that 5.33% COLA up to the 6.56. That's done in the budget. He does it across categoricals. But in addition to that, adds $2.1 billion directly to the base permanent ongoing funding. So the combination of these moves, in addition to the biggest other significant item other than the base funding piece, which is so great to see, is that he actually goes the rest of the way on the adjustments that we've all thought we needed for the near-term problems we're having with IDLA. And it was a combination of, we need to do something about declining enrollment that gives all districts that are in decline more flexibility over time. But we also need to do something about the current year. And we need to do all of it in the context of making sure we don't mess with the districts that are still growing, that they're entitled to get, you know, additional funding that they need to get. Although we didn't see any special appropriation that made up for some of the lapse in how they approach that issue, in the midst of the pandemic. That would be great if we saw a makeup on that. It's not there, but we do see an approach toward dealing with declining enrollment and the ADA issue in the current year that's really, really exciting. So the governor led on the issue of a 3-year rolling average, which will be really important later years, that we have a 3-year rolling average as an alternative on determining what your ADA is going to be, rather than the current approach, which is only limited to deciding between current year and prior year, whichever gives you more. That 3-year rolling average will be great. But if you invoke a 3-year average now and you have a really crummy year in the current year, it doesn't give you much. So the governor grapples with that issue, he addresses it, and has a fix in his May revision for the current year. And the totality of that fix with some of the things he's doing here, equal about $3.3 billion of ongoing funding, a little more than $400 million of one-time funding in the combination to do that. He's spending some serious money to try to address this issue for us as school districts. So the combination of base building, the bigger COLA, this issue really puts him on par in competing with what we see in the legislature we'll talk about in a minute. So the other major piece is an $8 billion block grant, and it's really sort of harkening back to a day of, he's channeling Jerry Brown, is that when Jerry Brown was governor, year after year, he would give us one-time money with an incredible amount of discretion for LEAs. He's got some things that he enumerates in there that he wants us to think about. Staffing is one, learning challenges are another, student well-being and student mental health. But it says cover some of these issues, but it's not just limited to that. They want you to use it for other things that you might need to use that for. So again, a really big block grant. Now it rivals what we've seen in the legislature again, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. He also augments some of the signature programs that he introduced in January. It was nice to see that he didn't invent a whole raft of new programs that he wanted us to try to get off the ground in the midst of the staffing challenges that we have. You've got a lot on your plate already with universal TK coming in, and then the issues with expanded learning opportunity. That, and then what we're doing with universal meals, which, by the way, he also put a bunch of money in for the universal meal program, and we know that he's getting going that. Just huge, big changes in what we're doing in education, but the money to actually make that happen in a lot of respects. We've got some work to do in a couple of key areas with the governor. One of them is on STRS and PERS, where he points to the money that he invests in the base and says that he hoping that LEAs would use that money to help defray some of their increased pension costs. That really undermines the idea of having a base builder if we've got to carry these huge increased costs of pensions out into future years. What we were hoping for was an allocation outside of Prop 98, just as Jerry Brown started, and even this governor, Governor Newsom, had done once before. That's the kind of investment we need in this issue outside of that $8 billion block grant. And again, it's hard to be too complaining about this particular budget. It's actually a much better budget than I expected to see. And the thing that I love about it is it sets the stage for that debate that'll happen between now and June 15th, when we get a final budget document with the governor. I've been telling folks today that I like it to be a contest about who loves us most. And we're happy to be engaged that debate. So pretty good news when you take a look at the overall budget revise. And we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of this during our workshops.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Yeah, and I guess one thing that comes to mind, first of all, I think the pins that we were showing off on the show worked. Clearly that got to the governor. They raised the base campaign, and it's exciting to see. Welcome news on so many fronts. I guess, what I was curious about, because things are starting to go so bad with the stock market, is this one of those years where we could see a significant change between now and June 15, because maybe some of the projections start to look worse than anybody had thought today. What are your thoughts there?
Well, yeah, and it was kind of what I started out with, and I was actually inspired by that, by the conversation I previously had about what's going on with the stock market. Is that, we know that because of this incredibly disproportionate amount of money that comes into state revenues from really high income earners, and that the income isn't from, working every day at the office, it's from investments. And it's huge, the amount of income that comes that way in terms of tax revenue to the state, that when, again, the stock market has this volatility, it scares us. But what we have seen, and we've seen this since the beginning of the year, we've actually seen a lot of volatility, but it pops back sort of in shape. The question is whether or not over sort of the short, long term, if that's such a phrase, that we see some corrections that end up having them, hit their mark. And again, the governor has been known, he is a Democrat, and Democrats get this sort of badge of liking to spend money. But the truth is, when you look at sort of the fiscal responsibility built into his budgets, it's there. Not only that, but he's got, these big giant amounts of money that he's stashed away into rainy day funds, not just for the general fund, but also the Prop 98 has a rainy day fund as well. And that's going to tend to insulate us. I heard one concern today from somebody about actually worried about putting too much money into the base, like what the Assembly is doing or the Senate is talking about doing. And that if you just overload the base, you're setting yourself up for budget cuts in the future to the degree that the budget can't sustain that level of investment. And my response to that is we want as much money in the base as possible, because the base becomes politically harder to cut than a lot of the other extraneous spending that we have, including the one-time funding. We will see if we get into a budget problem in the state, the one-time money drops off right away. And, jeopardy to potential categorical programs certainly is there. But there's a lot of sort of political downside for our elected officials in Sacramento when they go after that base, even in bad times. And even though we did see that's exactly where the governor went when he thought the bottom was dropping out of state funding during COVID, he proposed a 10% cut to LCFF. And, you wouldn't have thought that he would immediately go there, but that's where the money is. That's where the big money is. But again, that was a catastrophic drop in revenue that he was forecasting as a result of COVID. It never did happen. So we never had to face those kinds of cuts. I just don't see us facing that kind of drop in revenue where it makes the base vulnerable. So I'm in favor of putting as much money into that base as we can.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Because I'm trying to find that button, and I know I have it here somewhere.
No problem. Well, yeah, like I said, it was an effective campaign. I just want to there it is. Yeah, it came in handy. So yeah. I just want to underscore the budget workshops that you're talking about, where you dive deep into every one of these topics and every dollar. Those are coming up not next week, but the week after. You can sign up for these. They're free on the Capital Advisors website, and that link will be under the video. It'll be in the email that goes out from Capital Advisors team. Please make sure you sign up. Your county offices of ed have offered to host these at no charge for you. They're wonderful. I learned a ton, and I'm planning on attending myself, so please be there. And in the meantime, I have a couple of great tech stories for this episode. One, we've talked about getting families connected at home throughout the pandemic. And there's been some one-time money that's been dropped in for like a year program to get people connected at home, families connected at home. There's an American connectivity plan that has been launched that is ongoing. And if you remember, President Biden passed the infrastructure bill. It was $100 billion to get every American connected. $65 billion was for fiber. 14 billion of that was for ongoing dollars to subsidize internet for low-income families. And this program has been released. It's out. There's a website you can go to called getinternet.gov. We'll put a link to that in here as well. And just so you understand the numbers, there's about 11 families that are signed up for this now. There's about 11 million families signed up now, 48 million families that are eligible for this program. And this program is actually having a hard time reaching families. So there's no better way to reach them than the school districts where the children attend. So please take some time, go to getinternet.gov, make sure your families know about this program. And all the major ISPs have gotten behind, signed this document with the White House and said these families will get high-speed internet for no more than $30 a month. So that's wonderful right now. It could save your families some money or get folks on that are not on right now. Please help spread the word. And again, the link will be under the video in YouTube and in the email that goes out. Also, we talk about cybersecurity quite a lot on the show, and data privacy and passwords. And in a very amazing move, Apple, Google, and Microsoft, the three largest ecosystems that we deal with every day, have gotten together to create a new standard in which there will be no more passwords, or at least the end of the password is near. And what's going to happen is, instead of signing in with the password, we're going to use our phone, our personal device, to biometrically sign in or PIN sign in to when we jump on an application. So we don't need to remember a password anymore. Don't have to worry about those sorts of things. It's the same way we sign into our phone now. Or let's say you sign into your bank app on your phone, it asks you to use your thumbprint, face recognition, or PIN. The same thing will happen every time we go to use one of these tools. And you might think, okay, well, that's a little annoying because I have to have my phone by me, but it is something that's going to make things more secure, because your phone actually locally stores your biometric information and your PIN. So you don't have to worry about memorizing some long number. Now, if you don't happen to have your phone with you for whatever reason, you can still go back and do some old school authentication, old school password. But this is the beginning of a new era for us. Actually, each of these companies had their own version of it, but the fact that the three have now gotten together means this thing is serious, and we will actually be in a place, hopefully sooner rather than later, where we won't have to rely on passwords so heavily. And for those that have watched the show, you know passwords are one of the main reasons why we get hacked personally. Our data gets hacked as a business, as a school district. So this is a huge win for everyone. These three ecosystems have not always played so friendly. So for them to get together, this is a big deal for all of us. Very excited. And you can start using some of these features now if you haven't. Something you can turn on with Google and Microsoft and Apple, but eventually it will be all merged together. And I wanted to point that out and actually say thank you to those three big companies for making that happen for us. So Kevin, I do want to jump back in, because something we talked about on a couple of the last broadcasts were school meals. You know, the federal government said they weren't going to pay for them anymore. They did some backtracking. I know Senator Stabenow, had some efforts there. You just fill us in on the latest on school meals, and I know that's important to everybody.
Yes. So Senator Stabenow, who we mentioned before, and Senator Lisa Murkowski, so we're Republican and Democrat, we're working together on the idea of, let's, if Congress wasn't willing to do it as part of a budget process, let's do a separate bill, which they have done. So that's still sort of in the works. But the reason why there's kind of an interesting wrinkle to this, and it's sort of in a positive way, is that, Governor Newsom, of course, is pursuing in California his universal meal program. And so for the most part, school lunch programs and school meal programs in our state are really insulated from that debate a little bit. But what I like to say is that we should care about that, because if they are successful in Congress of getting over the finish line on that policy, it's going to directly help the state's overall investment in it and loosen up funds for other kinds of purposes. And that's actually a really good thing. We should really want that to happen. So in fact, the governor I mentioned had needed to put some additional dollars into that program to make sure that the funding was there, because I think we were counting on some of the feds to come through with some funding that would have offset this benefit that the governor's doing. He had said when he first pursued the policy, and I guarantee this will always be the case, that he expects and wants every local school district to pursue every dime of money that they are eligible for under the federal program, and then he will be there to pay for the balance. Well, you can imagine if the feds move toward a universal meal program, it pretty much pays the bill for him. So in the meantime, his anticipated costs on this whole thing have gone up, but he's remained committed to that, and it remains in his budget. I don't see the legislature veering off of that at all.
Well, that's great news, and glad that things have kind of turned around there. And again, like you said, it frees up more dollars to insulate us, or just have more dollars to push into the budget starting in June. So looking forward to looking forward to those workshops that you have coming up in a couple of weeks. And Kevin, I wanted to wrap up with, if you've watched the show for a while, you know that digital advisors and we do some work with USC Rosier to teach education leaders about technology and innovation. It's called the Innovative District Leadership Academy with USC. And we are actually launching some very targeted modules to help with some of the biggest issues you're facing right now One, we've talked about before on the show, staffing shortages. It's actually a big issue right now. It could be maintenance workers, transportation, food service workers, teachers, anybody in the district could, you could get some illness, some wildfires causing you to lose some staff and maybe shut down your school, your district, your department. So these staffing shortages aren't necessarily going away anytime soon. And in 1 month, you send your team in, we're going to spend some time with them and help you come up with some strategies to make that better. We're going to launch in June. We're going to run that again in September. We also have a cybersecurity and digital health module that we'll be running as well, starting in the fall. So if you haven't been to the website, please come back to the website and check it out. There's new offerings, which are those 1 month modules. And in 1 month, you're going to get a badge. You're going to get new strategies to tackle one of the biggest challenges you're going to face next year. And we're also relaunching our learning cohorts. We'll be starting in August, launching a full cohort where you're going to show up as a team, pick a challenge in your district, and throughout the course of a year, you're going to be able to solve that challenge with all the best tools, resources, thought leaders. Folks like Kevin and his team have been great contributors to that in the past. And you're going to get a certificate from USC, Innovative District Leadership Certificate. There's CEUs available for all these for your continuing education units. And a lot of great work is going on there. We've been kind of like laying in the weeds, waiting for the right time, and people are getting a little more time to be proactive finally. So please take some time to do so and invest. We'd love to have you join us, and we'll put the link to the website there as well. So just please, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say is that, and many of you have known, I've been out there trying to recruit in the past, this collaboration with USC, really important to get the distinction between the two things Tim's talking about. That short-term focus on staffing is really cool. And the resources that both USC and Tim, when you build these cohorts, pull together are really great. You're going to come up with solutions to those problems. But that longer-term thing, the thing that starts in August, which is that broader capacity building of not just you as a superintendent or a CBO, but with other members of your cabinet collaborating together, going together as a team to USC and signing up for that program is really an exciting launch of an extension of something that was started a couple of years ago by some of the biggest tech companies in the state. Cisco Systems, Intel, and others had kind of gotten that stuff off the ground, and USC picked it up because it really was good quality. So they're going to be looking for, you'll probably get an email from me talking you guys into or telling you a little bit about what that does. We don't have any financial interest in this at all. This is about doing the right thing, at least from Capital Advisor's standpoint. We want you to kind of get involved with it. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, Tim, that I want to make sure everybody knows that, and when I talk about that, the contest of who loves you most on the budget front, the Senate and the Assembly versions of the budget both have very aggressive approaches toward raising the base, perhaps a little bit more than the governor. The governor's is good. There's, I think, could be interpreted being a little bit better. But where the governor's May revision is better than anything we've seen on the legislature is that attention to declining enrollment and the ADA issues in the current year. And the big left out by all three is the STRS and PERS problem. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we think there's work to be done on that area. So the beautiful thing about knowing what the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor now all have on the table, we can see where the shortcomings are. And it's a very narrow band of issues. It's the smallest number of issues that we have to tackle that I can remember in the last several years. So we're going to be able to be laser focused in the advocacy for them to pick up and address some of these issues, including the issue of TK funding for our community funded districts. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't leave without mentioning those things.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And again, we're looking forward to those budget workshops coming up in a couple of weeks. So thanks so much for your time today, Kevin, and the updates on the governor's budget. We'll look forward to chatting with you again soon. And everybody, please let us know if you have any questions, and please help us share this out with your colleagues. And thanks for being here.
Great.
So thanks again for joining us for another week of this broadcast.
And I just want to take a moment to remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and share this out over social media. Again, you're our marketing team. I'll also finish by saying, if you have some questions, please send them our way. We'd be happy to address them on a future broadcast. So with that, thanks everybody, and we'll talk soon.